Let's talk about the defense. So they're 24.3 points per game. That's 26th in the league. Not very good. 364 yards per game, 28th in the league. Not very good. 136 rushing yards per league, 28th in the league. Yards per game, 28th in the league. Not very good. Now, let's throw all the numbers out. Okay, this is really about one guy. 2 weeks ago, Dexter Lawrence plays. Okay, Dexter Lawrence is number 97. He is an absolute unit. This guy is a game wrecker, okay? If anybody watched the Lennon game last year knows exactly who he is. I know Josh Myers knows who he is. He's on a hammy right now. But if I'm going to show you tape from the command, again, you can't watch the Patriots offense. It's unwatchable. You wouldn't take it. If I showed you guys, you'd be like, oh, well, this is the best defense in the league, because the Patriots game's unwatchable. Fingers crossed he stays hurt because he is a absolute problem. He's the best in the business. Not three technique, nose tackle. This guy's the best in the business. Now, the Giants are going to mix in a lot of quarters coverage with man coverage. They run some different pressure packages. When you're watching the tape or you're watching this live on Monday night, the linebackers tell the story. The linebackers are 5 yards deep. So if they're not at 5, something's going on. It's that easy. If one of them's staggered, he's coming. I mean, it's almost canon law. If they're not sitting at 5 yards deep, something's going on. They're going to run some sort of pressure game, or they're going to run some sort of stun up front. You can ID this entire game by where those linebackers are standing. If they're wide, there's a reason they're wide, and they do it. They're not even trying to hide it. I mean, maybe they are, but again, if I see it, I know that the guy on the other team's seeing it. Packers screen game should work really well this week. We didn't see a lot of screen versus the Kansas City Chiefs, but when you see how they line up, Micah McFadden and Bobby Okereke, it's because they bring pressure. You can throw the screen into pressure. You can throw the screen away from pressure. There's always one guy that you got to find, right? It's just when you're playing off, if Dexter Lawrence isn't in the game and you're all of a sudden you stop playing against Dexter Lawrence, you're playing against Deshaun Robinson, you're playing against Raheem Nunez, like those guys, you can double up to these linebackers. You can get movement in the run game. Like the whole game changes. When Dexter's in the game, real problem. When he's not in the game, it just, you feel like you can do a lot of stuff on the ground, especially and definitely in that screen game. They've got some good players on the back end. Like I said, they're going to run a lot of quarters coverage. They're going to run some man stuff. But with those opportunities, with those coverages come, deep cross. There's a lot of these routes that Jordan Love likes to throw, and we're showing that we're comfortable with contested catches. So you're going to see that sail 7. You're going to see the deep crossers. You're going to see follow routes where you clear out and come in behind. You're going to see all that stuff. There's a lot of opportunities for deep balls, especially in quarters. A lot of people think quarters, they got 4 deep. It's like, but if you run a post across the face of the backside corner and you follow it up, it's a leverage game, right? And so if you got speed on that second guy, always opportunities. Let's watch this. Elite. This is all from one game, mind you. So he presses the center. Easy tackle. Passing situation, I believe, here, based on the running back. Yep. I mean, listen, guys, that felt fast. I'm not putting this thing in like fast forward, but wow. I mean, for a guy, this dude's 350 pounds. I mean, it's ridiculous. Quarterback's got to scramble, but you just see he's a guy that takes away your confidence. He also tests your technique. If your guards are flat setters, this guy can't be pushed off his initial move unless you're a really good snap punch center. So he can really test your inside leverage at that guard position when they run the TT game. Gets in here for a sack. They had a fair amount of sacks against the Commanders as well. You're just hoping this hamstring's still tight, man, because it's the speed at which this guy moves for the size he is absolutely absurd. Like, it's absurd because he's as big as, for to put it into my generation, he's as big as like tractor trailer, Ted Washington, maybe not as big as Ted. He kind of reminds me of Chris Jenkins. I don't know if he's as good as Big Chris was, but Chris was like, I played with Chris. Chris fluctuated between 340 and 390, and he was almost as fast at 390 as he was at 340, right? So I don't know if Dexter's that good, but he reminds me of Chris in the fact that if he gets going downhill, it's big problems. See 56. That's sorry, Jihad Ward, 55. So they bring in 19. That's their will linebacker, and they run this 5-man look. And when they run the 5-man look, there's a lot of just nonsense going on. There's they're running like crazy stunts, double TEs, looper. Thibodeaux gets in. Thibodeaux's the first round draft pick from last year from Oregon. For me, he's had some success this year. I think his sack number is actually pretty decent. When I watch it, it's a lot of this stuff kind of like effort. Like he's not beating guys with technique. He's beating guys with speed, with leverage, with effort, but he's doing a much better job than he did last year, at least from a production standpoint. But again, he's definitely not a game plan guy because he doesn't really have moves yet. He's just he's a young player that's still trying to figure out what his go-to thing is going to be. But because they move around, because they have Dexter Lawrence really creating havoc in the middle there, I think it provides opportunities for these other guys. Now, here's some good news. We talked about it. These guys, look how deep they are. I mean, this is phenomenal. Think about how much time you have. You get the double. You get to come off on the linebacker. I mean, this is all you can eat Sunday because they play so deep. And why are they doing it? I don't know. I mean, they're tip and play. So you see he starts early. They walk up. I mean, when you're watching this, it's like one of those things where, as a somebody who watches film all the time, your eyes start going to different places. Like, you snap, okay, you're looking at the front, the coverage, and then you start dialing in on like, what are the tips, tells, and tendencies? And this jumps off the screen. They're at different heights now. They're at different levels. I'm talking about the two linebackers. So it's like, he's coming in pressure. And this is that one that Dexter Lawrence beat him real bad. Again, just creeping. He's wide. Bring an extra. And this is where the screen game, you run this into the screen game. And you look at the problem. I'm going to back it up for you guys. So they leave themselves really with 6 back, rush 5. And the linebacker or the drop safety, is going to be the closest guy. And this is just easy pickings. They had a number of screens work this game. Look how wide he is. I mean, there's absolutely no reason. I'll show this again. Even on the look outside, which you guys can't see, but there's only one reason to be out there. You're building in your leverage. And you can obviously, if you take that, and then, this is kind of offensive line nerd stuff. So excuse me. But if you see this, Jihad Ward 55, closer than he usually is. There's no reason for him to be this close in this situation. There's no chance of him getting cracked from somebody coming in. Right. So you kind of know they're moving differently. Like these guys don't. I guess what I'm saying is, if there was ever a time where you could read the tea leaves before the snap, like pre-snap recognition from the offensive line, running backs, etc., like protection stuff, running stuff, this would be the week because these guys really tip it off. What I think, to me, what happens is Dexter Lawrence just ruins a lot of it because he's so good. But they're going to give you opportunities to run the ball. More good news here. Again, you see they're on different levels, and they just don't attack the line of scrimmage. I mean, you see 58 here, and he should be butting this dude in the mouth, and he's trying to read this thing out against the 320-pound left tackle, Charles Leno. I mean, it just makes no sense, but hey, we'll take it. You got to love it. Playing the run. This is kind of always interesting when you're game planning and you want to run your trap game, your gap scheme stuff, and you want to pull a guard, pull a tackle. How are they going to play it? And it was interesting because these guys played it differently. So you see here against the tight end, Thibodeaux comes down, wrong shoulders, really rides that tight end down, closes out the gap, rides this down, gives that log look. So the tight end's going to really log him. They're going to run outside. And then you see 25 kind of sitting in the hole here. Interesting because on the other side, very similar action. and we're squaring up, we're not riding that tight end down, and this is just a cross. This is just a counter look, but the guard's able to kick him out. And I think you're going to see a lot more of the latter than the former, based on just what you see on tape. But there's, again, the reason I bring it up is there's space here. If you're going to leave that tight end untouched and you're going to play outside, as you start thinking about how many the game plan, if the center can hold up against 97, this is a very advantageous look, because when the linebackers play deep, the safety is also deep. So you look at the slot receiver on the left side of the screen here, he can get to 29 if they need to. That's an easy dig out because they're not attacking the line of scrimmage. They're reading. I mean, you don't know how these games are going to play out, but when you watch this on tape, you get a lot of confidence if you're thinking about the running attack for the Green Bay Packers. Got to match the coverage with the play call. So as Matt LaFleur continues to give this receiving core, give Jordan Love more information at the line of scrimmage, allow him to make more decisions at the line of scrimmage. When they're showing that they're playing, for example, when they're playing quarters, do we have a quarters beater? Right? Are we going to? We've been using motion a ton to identify coverages. Are we going to have checks? Do we need checks? Do we have a man beater that also works in quarters? They're running a ton of the same stuff week in, week out. And here, like, this is a play you're going to see. Now they end up getting a pick on this play. But if you're in quarters and you take care of that safety, you should have all this space. If you cross that safety's face to the low side, you should have all this space to run into. We showed this a couple of weeks ago against another defense. It's a bad throw. That's a bad throw. He doesn't lead his receiver, but you see the opportunity is going to be there. You just have to have the right calls on. So I always love these looks when you have your players split wide and the linebacker steps out, because now you can really mess with this linebacker. You can motion in your receiver and you can clear, and you have all this space for that linebacker to work against that safety, because you can see the safeties lined up on the slide here, but that linebacker has responsibilities as well. But if they're all going to play off like this, these quick screens can feature in the game, because really this linebacker should be out of the play. He's not quite wide enough to get there. So you're looking at, 7, 8, 9 yard pickups every time if you throw it to the right side of the ball and you can run downhill. Use your motion. So they show man. And when they show man, you're going to have a couple options here. Now, this is kind of a keeper, but this inside slot, so they're going to end up throwing this to the flat. They get a nice pickup, but the inside slot is actually, there's a safety on the backside that can drive if he does a crosser, but if the quarterback just pulls up, he can turn around and throw that inside slot at the top of numbers on the 40. Guy's wide open, right? Little quick in cut here, wide open play. There's opportunities because these linebackers will at times bite and come all the way up to the line of scrimmage. Logan. It's my man Logan Thomas with a fumble. That's terrible, Logan. Logan was a great story. He comes from Virginia Tech, played quarterback. He was in Miami with us. And he comes in one day, he's like, and literally he like, shoulder pads are different, because they wear different shoulder pads as the quarterbacks and tight ends. And we're like, hey man, what? And he's like number 82 now. And you're like, hey, what are you doing? He goes, well, it turns out I'm not going to be an NFL quarterback. I'm going to be a tight end. Sure enough, 7 years later, really good tight end in the National Football League. Motion creates confusion. They come across and they're having a hard time on the back end, talking about the Giants now, trying to figure out how they're going to rotate their safeties and who's picking up where. And what happens is it's just a little thing, but the linebacker really gives a free release and loses the tight end here on the sail 7. So they cleared out. They ran across the safety's face on the stagnant receiver, and because they have the motion and you're creating confusion, you're what you're trying to do is maximize communication pre-snap on the defense. So they're not sure. Their eyes have to go somewhere else. I mean, it forces you to play slow. It forces you to read things out and trust your eyes instead of anticipate. It gives you opportunities for big plays. Now, this guy has inside leverage. And, when you talk about different teams, different rosters, and just feeling like you should be able to win matchups, inside leverage, you should never be able to run a 3-step slant here and catch the ball, but they can. And my whole point is, again, you don't want to get overconfident, but you want to see that, like, the menu is open this week. If you run good routes, the menu is open here. Line of scrimmage checks. This is kind of more of what I'm talking about with, continuing to build out the menu and the playbook for Jordan Love at the line of scrimmage. They bring 19 down the line of scrimmage. Jihad Ward is playing over the center. We saw it earlier look like this. And they run a screen to the other side. And I'm pretty sure the Commanders are running a check out of this because they've done it twice. Two dogs, 2 screens, and maybe they just knew the Giants were going to have to bring a lot of pressure. But you see how good this looks against the New York Giants football team because when they commit, they really commit. I don't think they do a good job at the defensive tackle position of reading this out. In other words, maybe they're winning too early, but a lot of times the teams we played, the defensive tackle position has been stopping the screen from happening because they lag on the guard. We do a poor job. Maybe we double team the tackle at the end and they just get out and start making the play on the running back. Or we don't get this first defender out of the secondary. But these plays are wide open. This is an 8-yard gain. Doesn't look like much. It's an 8-yard gain. So with that said, there's just a lot of action, I think, on the defensive side for the Packers, for the Packers offense against this Giants defense. I would be, if it's me, I would be as excited at this opportunity as I have been all year. Monday Night Football game. They give up 136 or something like that or yards on the ground. Hopefully Aaron Jones is coming back. I don't know the status. I'm doing the show a day early.